audio, video. Make a touch in the mic button. There is a mic button inside of the camera button. Yeah, yeah. No, sir, not still connected audio. Okay. Good evening, everyone to present here in Facebook and YouTube Live. This is Rudra Narayan Das taking this privilege to warmly welcome you all to World Human Sciences and Management Conference 2021 and 22. Invitations to global dialogue on agnotological context, disciplinary practices of social sciences and policy frames. An initiative towards think time and rethink episteme. Distinguished participants, partakers, it is a glorious moment to extend my warm welcome on behalf of the Center for ADIVASI Research and Development. As this international conference is built with the intent of active and interactive learning and discussion organized by CARD in collaboration with Indian Institute of Management, Sambalpur, Central University of Odisha and Ravenshaw University, Cuttack. On behalf of CARD, I want to convey my heartfelt gratitude to our patrons, Professor Sanjay Kumar Naik, Vice Chancellor, Ravenshaw University, Professor Mahadev Joyful, Director, Indian Institute of Management, and Professor Sarath Kumar Palita, Vice Chancellor, Central University of Odisha. The convener of this largest virtual conference are eminent Indian historian, Professor Chandi Prasad Nanda, and eminent activist writer, Mr. Charuldat Panigrahi. Sir, the main outcome of this conference is to come up with national and international framework for education system in future. The crux of this conference will be the use of digital technologies such as artificial intelligence, augmented reality, and virtual reality that is being increasingly adopted after the outbreak of COVID pandemic. We hope this conference will help our students, faculties, researchers, and all to expand their mental horizon and help the education system to adopt the best in future. Ladies and gentlemen, our center, CARD, is a leading research-oriented institution promoting ethnographic, empirical, and evidence-based research for engaging and addressing the challenges that 21st century globe is facing today. The prime agenda of this institution is to come up with potential policy solutions for change, for social change, while believing in the idea of debate, dialogue, discussion, expertise, experiencing, and education. The institution focuses on marginalized communities and works for their livelihood to protect the nature, culture, language, and identity in particular. The age of modernity has witnessed that change is the only constant phenomena for societal purpose to enhance knowledge. Our information work for them is methodical and avoid paradoxical frameworks which is neglected so many centuries from theory to become practice. Our center sincerely believe in the concept of social marketing, which is seriously looking for non-profit marketing and builds new social entrepreneurship for check and balance mechanism to glorify generations to come. Center for Adivasi Research and Development comes to serve with the holistic approach of critical thinking in education to fill the gap and plan accordingly for the voiceless communities. It gives me tremendous contentment to introduce the most esteemed personality of today's symposia is none other than Professor Maguni Charan Behera ji. Professor Behera is the former professor of Indigenous Culture Studies and Dean School of Culture Studies at the Central University of Jharkhand. Professor Behera, MA PhD in Economics and from Utkal University, Bhubaneswar, Odisha, is a professor of Tribal Studies. Dr. Behera has been pursuing researches on tribal studies and mid-1980s. He has authored, edited, co-edited about 40 volumes covering a range of topics on tribes and tribal studies with focus on theoretical and methodological perspective, which have been published by national and international publishing houses. To his credit, he has about 100 research papers on national and international topics published in various national and international journals and periodicals. Professor Behera has presented more than 80 papers in national and international seminar, conferences, webinars in the country and abroad. Professor Behera is a member of many professional bodies. He was an associate at the Indian Institute of Advanced Studies, Simla, for 3 spells. Dr. Behera was also professor of Indigenous Culture Studies and Dean of School of Social Studies, Central University of Jharkhand, while Professor Behera was the director of Center for Distance Education, Rajiv Gandhi University. He introduced the tribal studies under distance education mode for undergraduate courses. This is the first instance in the country through he has published extensively on tribal issues. He has directed his efforts in 2014 to create materials on the tribal studies beyond disciplinary perspective to cover different tribes and diverse perspectives on particular themes. Professor Behera found editing of volumes useful, which are published by national and international publishing houses. The main purpose is to free the subject matter of tribal studies from disciplinary confinements and provide a perspective to build a tribal studies as an academic discipline. So we are very happy and we are very excited to listen to Professor Behera. As your topic is as suggested by you is that why tribal studies in India, which will definitely be an eye-opening session for all of us. We are very eagerly waiting to listen to you. So with this note, I will stop here and invite Professor Behera to initiate his talk. Over to you, sir.
Hello, am I audible?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Please continue.
Thank you, Dr. Das, for your nice introduction, nice formal introduction. But informally, something is different. Good evening, everybody. Particularly, I am very much honored at being invited to share my rambling thoughts on the topic, why tribal studies in India. For this, I am really grateful to Dr. Vikram Jena in particular and the organizers in general, giving me an opportunity to share my thoughts with you. But before launching into the formal presentation on the topic, let me be frank about my limitations and excitement. Just a personal note, I am not a good speaker, but I communicate in a better way when the two-way communication is initiated. So I look forward to questions from the esteemed participants so that it will be a fruitful exchange of ideas. Let me tell you why I was excited. First, the topic tribal studies, which has no disciplinary recognition yet, will be presented at a social science platform. Second, the broad thematic perspective of the lecture series that is the dialogue on ontological, agnotological context, disciplinary practices of social science and policy frames, underlies the context of appreciating the status of tribal studies. Third, the talk is organized by Center for Adivasi Research and Development CAR. So all these give me the hope that my advocacy for tribal studies will be rightly and critically appreciated, and this is the right platform where I shall spell out my points. I shall share my points with the esteemed scholars present in the forum. But first, perhaps there will be a confusion looking at the title, why tribal studies in India? So this is a little bit confusing in the sense it has both a negative and the positive connotations. Negative, why there should be a tribal studies in India? Why tribal should be studied? So this is a negative connotation. But perhaps this has no meaning in our present context, because we are going to discuss why there should not be the tribal studies. That is the positive connotation. So what I mean to say is that, so does it mean, so when I say why there should not be any tribal studies in India, does it mean that there is no tribal studies? But this is definitely a negative confirmation, because we have studied tribes from the very beginning, especially from the colonial period. The studies are conducted on tribes. So there is no tribal studies, the question does not arise. Then what is actually important is that the tribal studies is there, but the tribal studies is not recognized as an academic discipline in our country. That will be the focus or moot point of my discussion and argument. Now we can see the two trends. From the very beginning, especially the colonial administrators followed by the anthropologists focused on the study of the tribes. Of course, for some time the sociologists also took interest in the study of tribes, but it is the anthropology that is credited of taking care of the study of the tribes from the very beginning. But now the situation has changed. We have two trends. If we observe empirically, we can find two trends in the study of tribes. The first trend is the anthropology, which claims to be the flag bearer of the study of tribes, has diversified. They do not study the tribes, they study some other aspects. Even nowadays, the Western scholars have extended their study to the primate studies of the primates. That means from human beings to the primates. Similarly, in India, they are taking up the issues of feminism, the other type of issues they are taking up. They are studying the civilizational studies, the religious studies other than the tribes. So they have crossed their boundary from the tribal studies. That means in anthropology, tribe is now has a peripheral status. So that is the problem. At the same time, there is a convergence. Convergence in the sense the other disciplines like economics, political science, sociology, history, education, ecology, botany, zoology, religion, law, social work, linguistics, folkloristics, and all these take interest in the study of the tribes. So now the scope of the tribal studies has pervaded almost all the disciplines in life science and also in social science. In recent years, the tribal astrophysics is also being engaged with, but much has not been done so far, because the reason is that these studies are being conducted at a disciplinary level, So that is why here my point or my advocacy will be why we should develop the discipline of tribal studies in our country, and what should be its nature and scope, what should be the task ahead of us to go ahead with this. But before that, let me tell you a simple story. The story is like this. In once upon a time in a village there lived an orphan. His name is Orphan Gopi. He is known always as an Orphan Gopi. But where did he come from? Nobody knows. But he was popular as Orphan Gopi. Everybody liked him because he has to attend every call and beg of the people who needed him. He used to help everyone at every time. So what happened? But he did not have a home. He lived in the veranda of somebody's house, or he lived on the veranda of somebody's house, or in the temple premises. So like that, he spent his life. Whatever you got, he ate. Whatever you got to wear, he put on. So this was his life. But he was very popular by the people. Even sometimes people outside identify the village in his name. Oh, you are from that Orphan Gopi's village. So that was his dish. But he had also established a domain of relations with the villagers. Some are his uncles, some are his aunties, some are brothers, sisters. This type of relations was established. There was also an exchange, reciprocal exchange, because people also used to address him beta, something like that. So this was his life. But the irony is that no one, no family owned him or tried to own him. Even he did not belong to the village. He was simply Orphan Gopi. His identity was Orphan Gopi. He belonged to everyone, but nobody belonged to him. No family truly meant to honor the relations they hold to him. So tribal studies like that Orphan Gopi. Several disciplines in recent years are engaged in tribal studies. Scholars from these disciplines take pride in identifying themselves as working in tribal studies. But each discipline gives its own identity to the color, to the tribal studies. They give the color of their own discipline, but not take the discipline color of the tribal studies as a distinct discipline. For example, as we see the political science, the core methodological or approach of a political science is power, authority. So whenever the political science students or scholars engage in the study of the tribal political system or tribe, they look from that lens, through that lens, from that perspective, authority, the political organization, political institutions, and underlying these institutions, the issue of authority and power structure. So this is the perspective of political science. Similarly, economics deal with the informal system maximization of the profit and aggregation principle, but that is not applicable to the tribal economics. So whatever happens, so it is just like a round peg in a square hole. The tribal studies are engaged with some of the perspective which from the different disciplines, but exactly do not fit into capture the reality about the tribes. So this is the problem at present with the tribal studies. So the question is, can we have a separate tribal study? It is feasible. But if you see the evolution of the departments, a few years back, the departments were joined. Joint in the sense, anthropology, sociology was one department, philosophy and psychology was one department, economics and political science was one department. So these were the single departments, but now they have bifurcated. We have now different departments, department of anthropology, department of sociology separate. Even folklore or the music, these were the parts of the anthropology. Now we have folkloristic, a separate department of folkloristic. So what does mean that it is the possible when the knowledge system is jointly engaged with, have the potentiality of being specialized, to give it more focus and to give it more time and perspective. So it is possible. Separate department is possible. Another thing is that nowadays Earlier, there was the Department of Anthropology. Now we see in many universities there is a combined nomenclature of the department, like Department of Anthropology and Tribal Studies, Department of Anthropology and Tribal Development, Department of Anthropology and Folklore, Department of Folklore and Tribal Sociology. So this type of joint nomenclatures are there in the department of many of the universities. What does it mean? This means that anthropology cannot fully address the issues of the tribes. That is why it has a tail added to it. So obviously now it is the time, there is the scope, there is the suggestions from within the academics that tribal studies need separate treatment. So what I argue, or what I mean to share with you, that tribal studies can be established as a separate department for two reasons. Because now the department which earlier treated tribal studies has added tribal studies as an appendix to give it proper attention. Second, earlier joint departments are diverse, are separated. The third point is that some of the issues which disciplinary parts cannot do also is possible to do in our tribal studies department. That part I will discuss a little later. So what are the problems? What is the status of tribal studies at present? Let me discuss first the institutional status of the tribes. At the administrative level, we have National Commission, Tribal Research Institute in many states, line Ministry of Tribal Affairs, various centers, institutes, and departments in the institutes. So, in addition to the administrative constituent of the institutes dealing with the tribes, we also have in the academic department research centers. Then government organizations and NGOs, non-governmental organizations also take interest in it. In addition, we find there are all the funding agencies, whether it is international funding agencies or Indian funding agencies like ICSR, ICHR, or this Mokai Maulana Abdul Kalam Azad Institute of Asian Studies, or the UGC. They are profusely funding to the projects on tribal studies. Interestingly, nowadays there is no pure research in many of the departments. They are simply the project conducting departments. So in that way, so the scope of tribal studies, the interest in tribal studies, the need for tribal studies is increasing, expanding in every sphere, but unfortunately, it has not been recognized as a distinct discipline. There are many tribal universities. Till date, we have Indira Gandhi National Tribal University, Amarkantak, and its campus in Manipur. We have Govinda Guru Tribal University in Banswara, Rajasthan. Pandit Raghunath Murmu Tribal University, Jamshedpur, Jharkhand. Central Tribal University of Andhra Pradesh at Visakhapatnam. Even in Odisha, Kalinga Institute of Social Sciences also is an acclaimed tribal university in the country. So there are universities for to cater to the need of the tribals, but unfortunately, except keys, almost all the universities follow the conventional courses, not the tribal studies. So that is the irony. In every state where there is a tribes, in Punjab, Haryana, and Delhi, no tribal population is enumerated. In all other states, there is a TRI, Tribal Research Institute, in different names. So at government level also, institutes are working for the tribes, and also the university department are opened up to look into the matters of the tribal studies. But unfortunately, the syllabus, the courses introduced, the programs undertaken are something different. In addition, there are other central institutes like we have the Central Institute of Indian Languages, Mysore, Anthropological Survey of India, Calcutta, Indian Statistical Institute, who take up the works on tribes. Then what are the programs offered? The programs offered are degree and diploma course and sometimes in PhD course. In Berhampur University, in the university campus, there is no department of tribal studies, but it recognizes the course. The course Council of Analytical Research, Koraput, it is recognized by, it is a campus of Berhampur University, so to say, where PhD degree and MPhil degree in tribal studies is provided. So what I mean to say is that there are institute, research institute, universities, and also some other institute like Tata Institute, who this Indira Gandhi Open University, they have courses for the tribal studies. Diploma and degree, PG diploma, simple diplomas, there are center for tribal studies. Even Himachal Pradesh, from the very beginning, they have an institute of tribal studies, but not the department. But that is the main problem. So why instead of the department, they are centers and they are institute. It has not been upgraded in many universities. Then another problem is there nowadays to understand the status of this. There are certain universities which started the Department of Tribal Studies. We can take the example of Baripada, the North Odisha University. First, it started the Department of Tribal Studies, but in course of time, it is changed the nomenclature. Now it has become Department of Anthropology and Tribal Studies or Tribal Development, something like that. Similarly, the most striking example and also a ridiculous situation has taken place in Central University of Jharkhand. The Jharkhand started with 4 departments concerning the tribes. That is the Indigenous Culture Studies, then folklore, then literature and folklore, then customary laws and tribal music. But immediately tribal music department stopped because we did not get the resource teachers, human resource to man the department. Second, in course of time, this Center for Indigenous Culture Center, it is changed into the Department of Tribal Studies. But when it became the Department of Tribal Studies, the courses were offered in folklore and anthropology. But now, last week, the department has again renamed and it has become the Department of Anthropology, and the tribal and customary laws, they have joined with the international relations. So there is a shift. Starts with the tribal studies, but in course of time, it is shifted into the anthropology or anthropology with some appendix. So this is the current situation in our time. Then there, it has been found that in many of the universities, especially in social work and management, they under the distance mode, even maximum distance mode universities, they offer social work or management program in which tribal studies is a compulsory paper. So with all these things, there is a green signal that the UGC has recognized all these departments. This UGC recognized tribal studies as a department, as an academic department, but unfortunately, tribal studies has not been recognized as a department, as an academic department at the academic level. So what is the problem? Why the change of the name occurs? There are 3 problems. First, there is no net in tribal studies. and job, especially the job opportunity, is the main constraint, which becomes a plea by some of the disciplined stalwarts to change the name, because there is no net introduced in UGC for tribal studies or some allied subjects. Second, there were also efforts to introduce tribal studies as an optional paper in public service commissions, whether it is state or union public service commissions, but it has not taken place. So that these are the two factors for which it becomes easy to convince the authority, to convince the students that the department has no job opportunity, no job potentiality. So this should be changed into tribal anthropology. So the other problem is that there is no difference between the syllabus of tribal studies and the syllabus of anthropology, because the initial human resource or the people who are engaged in preparing the syllabus for the tribal studies are drawn from sociology or from anthropology. So what we get ultimately, it is the syllabus of either sociology or syllabus of the anthropology. So when the syllabus, there is the repetition of anthropology, it is better to go for the anthropology department, not for the tribal studies. So these are the two important factors for which it becomes easy, convenient, and convincing also to change the department of tribal studies into the department of Department of Anthropology or Sociology, Anthropology or social work. Like this, the department is being changed. But one department is there in Himachal Pradesh University at Kangra, the new Dharmasala, the new university, central university. The department has started, but yet the department is not operational. The University of Amarkantak and Rajiv Gandhi University, they have the full-fledged PG department, but unfortunately, this Department of Tribal Studies in Amarkantak gives importance to folklore and literature, because the same problem of the net examination. But Rajiv Gandhi University still has its own syllabus different from the anthropology and runs both MA program, MPhil program, and PG program in tribal studies. So what we mean to say, there is a department of tribal studies, but there is no discipline of tribal studies. Because a discipline is recognized if it has a different perspective, it has its own method and approach, it has its own perspective approach to look at the things. But this is not there in case of this tribal studies, because all the people involved in tribal studies look at tribal studies from the lens of their departmental perspective. Yet we have not thought of what will be the perspective, what will be the approach, what will be the method that will distinguish tribal studies from other disciplines which have their own method of dealing with the tribals. So like all other disciplines, tribal studies is lacking a disciplinary approach perspective, and the people, the faculties who are drawn from different sources, they give importance to the orientation of their own discipline, because they have their perspective of the parent discipline. That is why the bias, the disciplinary bias, does not give a scope for the tribal studies to develop its own curriculum or own perspective. So there is also lack of vision of the academic leader, because academic leader are from different, even from the science or commerce stream. So they do not understand the nuance of the tribal studies, its importance, and the core of the perspective it can develop. So these are some of the problems for which the tribal studies has not been evolved as a discipline. The question is why we should think of tribal studies. Is the tribal studies not a part of other disciplines? Why should we go for this? Will it add something more to what we have and what the other discipline contributes with regard to the tribal studies? If we have something, if we can add more by organizing the discipline of tribal studies, it is well and good. So, if not, then there is no need of having a separate tribal study. But here I will give you one example, very recent examples. Now the government of India, to commemorate the 75 years of independence, is launching different programs. One of the programs is to document the unsung heroes, the heroes who are neglected, not become a part of the national history of the freedom struggle, national history of the freedom struggle. So this is the question. So especially the focus is on the tribal freedom fighters who have not been recognized or who have not been a part of the history of the India's freedom struggle. Why? Sociology is studying the tribes, tribal studies, anthropology is studying the tribes, all the departments are studying the tribes, history is studying the tribes. Then why there is no mention of these, so that there is a government interference in the academic activities? This is because each discipline has its own perspective. For example, till a recent year, history depended on the written evidences, written records, or the hard materials. But in the tribal society, hard material is very rare. It is the orality that gives the knowledge about the tribal society. So that is why each discipline has its own boundary, each discipline has its approach. So within that approach, it was not possible to record the heroes of the freedom fighters. So this is the problem. Now, another thing, now everybody must be knowing, especially those NGOs, they must be knowing about the importance of organic manure, organic farming. But has any department focused on this organic farming of the tribes? Because the tribes never use the fertilizers. They use manures, that is the natural manure, natural way, but never their farming is inorganic. While organic is getting importance in the international market, the products of the tribals which are inherently organic are not being considered. Some NGOs are raising the matter, but academically it has not been conceptualized or theoretically developed, so that this academic consciousness will arise that they are this farming. I will give you another example. In 1981 census, there were tribal individual tribes have been recorded in the census, and B.K. Rai Burman, a great anthropologist, he was in charge of this census. I mean, he was the Registrar General of the census. But what happened? Till that time, the tribe did not know that they belong to one particular community in many of the cases. I will give another example. In Arunachal Pradesh, the Adi tribe, there is no Adi tribe. Even people do not know that they are Adi. So what he wrote in the census, whatever they told, that I belong to, I am an Adi. Some people say I am an Adi, I am a Galo, I am a Minyong, I am a Padam, I am a Pasi, or any clan name they said, that become a tribe. So in Arunachal Pradesh, we have now 110 tribes, but we do not know who are they. Now, in recent census, it has been rectified. What I mean to say is that the anthropological knowledge which we carried to understand the census gave us the distorting figure. So when the number of tribes are more, automatically the planning policy will look into that number of tribes. So then the policy implication is based on the wrong information, wrong statistics because of these things. So these things are continuing. Even so, these are the things for which I think tribal study as a discipline will have its own identity and free itself from the confinements of the disciplinary perspective or boundaries. So how this will happen? What other benefit it will have to the society? First thing, literature will be created. We have stereotypes about the tribe. In the present syllabus, we study the ethnography, the ethnographic book written during the British period. So when we read the ethnography written in the British period, during the British period by the colonial authors, with their own perspective of divide and rule, we develop a impression or idea, image about the tribal people. That means how the tribals were there during the colonial period have not changed. That stereotypes give us the image, and accordingly we either formulate a plan or we interact with them. So that becomes sentimental to them, because now tribes have also become consciousness of their own identity that marks a dividing line between tribes and non-tribes. Perhaps when the literature will be available, then from the different perspective, then perhaps this type of division, this type of stereotypes will be somehow minimized. It will create a sense of pride among the people, among the youngsters about their culture, because globalization, the education system of formal education, the job requirement, training for the job requirement has alienated them from their cultural ambience. For example, in early time, the fireplace, central fireplace was type of school. When the grandparents used to tell the story, they used to learn informally their values, their heroes, all these things. But now school-going children do not go to this fireplace, they stay in residential schools. As a result, they are alienated from the environment and alienated from the cultural modes. So if we can have the tribal studies and the materials can be prepared, perhaps that will give them an idea about their own culture. As I told, the disciplinary limitations will be removed. Presently, in the indigenous movement has gained momentum in our country, and though tribes are not indigenous, all the tribes are not indigenous. Why? Because see, the Siddhi tribe, they came from Africa. Siddhi tribe, they came from Africa. In Pithoragarh, in Sipiti area, the Brahmins are also tribals. The Brahmins are tribals, the Rajputs are tribals. In Northeast, the latest migrant from the Tibet is it 1921. So how they can be the indigenous to India? Even to India, forget about the indigenous in India. Some people claim that they're indigenous in India, but the thing is that Orang, for example, they migrated from Rohtas God. They trace their origin in South India. How they can be the indigenous in Jharkhand? But even if we accept that these people are indigenous, then what is the historicity of other community, other people, who are so-called non-indigenous? What is this? What is their historical settlement in a particular area? So this is really confusing, but there is no engagement or no clarification about this, except Andrew Bate. He is also sociologist, not anthropologist. Except Andrew Bate, others have not clarified what is the issue, who are the indigenous in India. So similarly, so this indigenous issue is not a subject matter in anthropology that takes pride in dealing with the tribes, because their perspective is a cultural perspective. Their perspective, disciplinary perspective, is cultural perspective, and they study culture in a community context, not all the different communities. There is also comparative study, but the study, the community, the culture as the focal point. But when we are talking about indigenous people, indigenous community, it is inter-community space. It is an inter-community space at a national level. So that cultural perspective does not allow it to study the indigenous people as such. Then another problem, Naxalite movement. Anthropology approach does not allow to study the nationalite movement, or for that matter, any type of tribal methods which takes place across the tribes in a region. So there is the disciplinary inadequacy in dealing with all the methods concerning the tribe. So the discipline perspective distorts the holistic perspective. Holistic approaches, the problem is that they are holistic to study the tribes, different aspects of tribes in an integrated sense, but they do not study they do not apply approaches in a holistic manner. So this is another difference of this. As I gave the example of history depends on the hard evidences, but myths and legends are the source of knowledge of the tribes, which are written, which are oral narratives. So there also the knowledge system of the tribes remain incomplete in historical perspective. So again, the problem is that a knowledge can be approached in two ways, in a holistic way and in a reductionist way. Western approach to knowledge is reductionist. That is why the knowledge system is studied through different disciplines. The knowledge is divided into different disciplines like political science, history, all these things. But the whole knowledge system is like a honeycomb, where each disciplinary aspect is just like a cell. So this is not we get from the Western system of disciplinary approach to knowledge, which we have inherited from colonial period, colonial perspective. So disciplinary boundary does not allow to study the knowledge outside it. So to filling up the gap, it is necessary to have tribal studies as a different department. What are the other problems? Once it was like this, there is always a gap between the civil servants and the tribal people. We have many rebellions, or we have many protests about some of the policies, because always there is a gap between tribes and tribal people and the administration. Tribal people and the military officers, when they go to operate to conduct some operation in tribal areas, that gives a sentimental agony to the tribes. Then why this happens so? Because everyone is having a cultural attitude of viewing the others. This is what happens with our civil servants and also military officers. So what is important is that they should be oriented about the tribe, and that is only possible if what is tribal studies is given importance. So otherwise, if you do not understand the culture of the tribe in a right perspective across the disciplines, then things do not happen as expected. I will give you one simple example. In 1952, the government of India, with some Assam rifle personnel, entered into the Tagin area to establish the Indian administration at Daporijo. But before two stages, the people, the Tagin people came and offered the party some red chili. The party, this Assam Rifle and the Indian administration party thought that these are the tribal people, it is their way of to that place. So, but giving a chili means you are not welcome. Giving chili means you are not welcome. They did not understand the cultural implication of their gift. They took it otherwise. So when they advanced, they were massacred. So this is known as 1952 Asimari massacre, a famous historical incident of brutality. So it is not the cold-blooded murder. It is a misunderstanding because the people, there was some communication gap. So this type of things happen when there is no good communication between the giver and the taker. So similarly, once the government has tried to establish low-cost latrine, but actually the people they live in pile homes. So below they keep their pigs, and their latrine is used as the food of the pig. So why should they? All the latrines were not used, became useless. So always. But this is also proposed by the administrators with their knowledge, and where the anthropologists are also working. So this gave us some gap between the people's aspirations and the government desire. A mismatch is there that creates a problem. I hope tribal studies will look at this, because it is not confined to any disciplinary perspective, disciplinary boundary. So earlier studies misinterpreted in different places. Now there is a movement that religious identity, Sarana religious identity or identity. The reason is that there is an increasing in the Hindu population, so that has a vote bank implication. But it is the fact is that these enumerators did not know what tribal religion is. So sometimes I will give the example of Santal region. Santal are known as they have a particular religion, Saradharma. So during that time, some people say we belong to the Marangburu religion. Marangburu is nothing, a mountain, a sacred mountain of Marangburu. Some gave a particular name. Some gave Kharuar, some said Kharual, because this is a phonetic variation. So it created 5 religious groups within the Santal community. So now what happened? When it was rectified, one religion was there, then 4 religions became less. So number of religions became less. When the number of religions became less, it does not mean that they became the Hindus or they became the Christians. It is because of the mistake of the enumerators that these things happen. So, but it has a different implication that the number of religions, decreased because they have become converted to some other religion, especially to Hindus. So this type of mistakes will arise if there is not a proper study. Why there is not proper study? As I shared with you, the anthropology studies the community, but India is not one community or two communities, hundreds of tribal communities. The anthropologist studying in Arunachal Pradesh does not know the tribes of Kerala. A anthropologist studying in Kerala does not know tribes in Himachal Pradesh or tribes in Kashmir. So how can there be a consciousness about the general characteristics of the tribe for which there will be a homogeneous or at least a macro understanding of their aspirations, needs, and for which we can have some policy measures. So these are some problems which are problem because of these disciplinary things, and that is why limitations of the disciplinary boundaries and the need, societal need of this societal need. Why societal need? Earlier we did not have any center of border trade. Now we have, because the society needs it. Society needs a separate study. That is why this is center there. Then we have the Center for Environmental Study. We have the Department of Central Environmental Study. Or presently we have exclusion and public implication. These new studies are coming up because there is a societal need. Similarly, there is also societal need for the tribal studies. Why there is a societal need? Societal need is because the society tries to cope up with the present requirements. So tribal studies will help. The need arises of the tribal studies because of the it has a social context. It can maintain the diversity not of the tribes, diversity of the Indian populace, preserve the culture and the interaction of the culture. Indian culture is not this or that. It is not a categorized whole, but it is something, an interactive space. So rethinking development through the culture. Inter and multidisciplinary approach to knowledge is developing after this post-modernization era. The voices of tribal and indigenous people, the recognition to human rights, emerging spread of specialized studies, as I discussed, with exclusion studies, all these things. So they are in fact compel us to think of tribal studies not from different disciplines, but as a discipline in itself. So it is very necessary. It has a societal need. That is why we shall think of tribal studies as a different thing. So what is the task ahead? Simple. When the problem is identified, the solution is not very far. Job link, the net, introduction of the net, and introduction of the paper in Public Service Commission, and introduction of it at a graduation, undergraduate levels. So these are the very things for which a concerted effort is necessary and a strong political will. Political will is necessary. The politicians and the government can be impressed upon its benefit. The most important part is the course material availability. Simply preparing the syllabus will not do. The course material should be available for the students to study it. So this is one. Then, as I told, ethnography has no necessity now. We said think of the how we can link them. Even social work of the tribal studies can be linked with the tribal studies syllabus. So that will help not only for the job market, also in building up a sense of appreciation to diversity and differences. So with all this, what will be the objectives while preparing the syllabus? The objective should be to understand the tribal culture and communities and their contribution to making of Indian civilization in an interactive mode. To instill in youngsters a sense of appreciation and respect to diversity, to develop a holistic thinking and humanistic feeling through exposure to finer aspects of tribal culture, to understand the development needs for action plan for an inclusive and socially cohesive development. So it should be a platform for public policy advocacy, to produce the literature, various aspects of life and culture of the people. So with all these objectives, if proper syllabus is there, so that the faculties drawn from different sources will not have a problem, will not have a hesitation or inhibition to start with. So with all this, if I think it is already 1 hour, I was allotted 1 hour. I will, or shall I continue?
Please continue, sir.
So these are the problems with us. So how this problem will be tackled, how this problem can be translated into the people, to the people's benefit, tribes' benefit, it is the important thing to deliberate upon. The tribal communities are now interacting with various external forces. These forces have different dimensions which are not conducive to the preservation of tribal culture. For example, English is linked to the job market. A state language also plays same role for the speakers of minor languages in the state. Language which has a link with the job market becomes the lingua franca of the population. So moreover, the formal system of education promotes knowledge system which is alien to the tribal view. At some level of thinking, speaking of language of a major population adds to the status of the speaker. The inferiority superiority complex is linked with the language one speaks. So under such a situation, how can the language will be preserved? Language will be preserved if it is used, if it is practiced, if literature is created. So perhaps tribal studies will be a better choice in this context. So another problem is that in Odisha, Odia is a subject up to undergraduate level. So through the Odia literature, the people, the students, they come to know about their culture, whether it is a story, whether it is a poem, whether it is a one-act drama, so whether it is a novel. So they talk about the Odisha culture, Odisha people. A perspective sense of Orianness is incorporated, instilled in the mind of the students who studies the Odia. But how the tribal students study, what a tribal student studies, there is no literature, there is no story. Of course, in Odisha, it is a better position because some of the writers, they study the tribes, they have written. But if you compare all India level, then in many, there is no writing at all. Now they're writing, but they are writing in different languages, not in tribal languages. It is okay if it is not in tribal language, if it is in a language which can be read and understood by the tribal students, then it will develop a sense of belonging to the culture, and at the same time, how much they share with a greater culture, and the people of a greater or superior so-called superior culture or literary tradition will also understand the cultural values, the human values in the tribal culture. So unless and until the platform is provided specifically for the purpose of the tribal studies, this situation will continue. The frontiers of knowledge will be more comprehensive and inclusive. As we know, the knowledge, the formal system of knowledge, which before industrial revolution, the place of work the place of residence were same. People work where they stayed. But after industrial revolution, the place of production became factory, the place of residence became different. A new system, new social order evolved. So with this new social order, a new branch of knowledge developed. And this branch of knowledge is what we have inherited, not before the before the industrial revolution, which is equivalent to, which is same as the tribal studies, the knowledge which we experience or which we see among the tribes. So with that knowledge, with the knowledge of a different society, if we approach the tribe, then it will be very difficult to understand the nuance of the tribe. I will cite, it happened in front of me. One fellow from Punjab, he came to study the tribes in an interior village. He asked, do you take rice? No, we don't take the rice. Do you take chapati? No, we do not take the chapati. Then his conclusion was, these people are starving. But he did not understand that these people also have something to eat, their staple food for which they are surviving. So we come to study the tribes with our mind, with our perspective, with our cultural lens. So that bias will be removed if there is an interaction with the cultural interaction at different regions of different peoples and different context and temporal situation. So in tribal studies has immense to do as it's as a separate department. But unfortunately, these things are not happening. These things are not happening. But always there is always a scope. Scope means recognition to the specific needs. Earlier, this Bodo tribe did not have a language, but now Bodo is a language and is a university department. It has a net. It is recognized. In Ranchi, the only department in the country, tribal language, it has a net because the founder, Ramdayal Munda, he could manage it. The only thing is that our academic leaders will cooperate, will think of it with a commitment and sincerity of purpose. If they try, net will not be a problem. Introduction of this in a undergraduate level or public service commission will not be a problem. So if these problems are removed, there will not be the plea to convert tribal studies into other departments. So shall I? Hello? 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 Hello?
Yes, sir.
Shall I stop now?
Haan, sir. Please conclude, sir.
So what I would like to share with you that this is a time and perhaps the right platform where I have shared advocate for the Department of Tribal Study to take up the matter. So if an ounce of action is better than 100 ounces of speech. So now action, not contemplation, should be the motto to establish tribal studies as a department. So with this, I conclude and thank you very much for giving me patient hearing. Hello. Hello. Hello.
Thank you so much, sir, for your very insightful and very thought-provoking lecture. What CAD is really feel proud, and it's really our privilege and honor to got a person like you from our mother soil, Odisha, and as well as you always contesting through this voice of this unbiased community and larger perspective of the society as a whole. Importance of tribal studies in India with them, not on them, with them always. Need of the hours to think through their belongingness and institutionalized emotions and feelings. Our center always believes in marginality and respect their voices without working on marketing pressure. You rightly pointed out these points. On marginalized and unsolved to mapping hunger and injustice everywhere. This is the time to light on Adivasi epistemological violence and crisis of climate through their peer review of ancient beliefs. Our academic and academician always neglected their opinions or views. Love towards motherland. It's really very pathetic and very terrible. Low voices means no voices. Let us introspect new dimension parties of their theory and understanding and larger interest of communities and indigenous knowledge systems at the center of attraction to know actuality versus realities. Methodological practice and white approaches are cumulative, their perspective in a different narrative and narrations. Sir, what you are spoke more than 62 minutes. You rightly picked out so many issues and you counted 29 institutions which is really working hard on particular these Adivasi issues and these tribal development perspectives. Then my question is that after 75 years of independence, how far is the knowledge concerned? How far is the knowledge industry concerned in a global phenomenon or in global South societies is concerned? Why not a particular tribal studies kind of approach? Even you rightly mentioned about ethnographical approach is not the right approach. What does the anthropological people always instinct of this anthropology of their ideas, and the sociological people also socialize their and monopolize their ideas into peaked into particular the pockets of tribal areas. And you rightly mentioned about when the historicity of historians rightly mentioned by you as a great tribal studies master, the tribal studies hero, and a genuine voice who has been advocating so many years. You are a professor, your profession started as a teacher, then you jumped into join in university, and you wandering and visited so many states of this country, try to understand the realities of the tribal voices. What actual today when we are missing here from today? Why we should or our center should think through the belongingness of ideas related to the nature and environmental justice, and even the political narrations. You rightly mentioned about the political society as concerned. Always we have discrimination related to this political society and the political philosophy and the modern society is concerned, and how far is concerned in the post-ontological equality about human justice. These are the very seminal and very refreshing ideas, sir. And our center always believes CRD, Center for Adivasi Research and Development, about the holistic approach of the global South societies in terms of solidarity, habitability, and customarily with the subalternity past and their future also. This is the submission of my own side, sir. And at the same time, this is a dialogue series, and you have no doubt when you started your lecture, you said you are not a good speaker. Nobody sure about that after deliberation of yours. First time I listen you in Zoom or via online, but you spark and ignite many young minds like me. I spent 25 years in a particular tribal area, which is the tribal capital of India, that is called Koraput. And Koraput, not only a lesser than university like Harvard, Oxford, and Cambridge, because we people always believing somebody from abroad should come overnight with blazer and tie and he will change our scenario, he will change our perspective, he will change our methodology, he will change our any narrations about the tribal policy and tribal culture. Sir, if you agree with my ideas related to, you rightly mentioned about the culture and cultural genesis of the tribals. When I listened carefully about you, I remembered Kulke's work on Jagannath cult, even the
Yes.
Nilamadhava. And even if you look back the ancient past of Indian mythological context, the Naga movement happened in particular uh, in the age of Dwapara. And in Tretaya, the Sabari tradition was there.
Yes. Yes.
And it's really very instrumentally and monumentally, we can say, India is a country of biodiversity and many of communities. We don't
Cultural
believe,
diversity.
yeah, we don't believe in single kind of community or any piece of right
Any type
abroad.
of categorization.
Yeah, any kind of report or any kind of submission from any white writer, that should be always considerable. This is my submission, sir, and thank you so much. Any
Thank
of
you.
your
You added the point which is left, because what we know, tribe and tribal culture, it is started from colonial period. But these tribes and Indian people, they lived thousands years ago also from the ancient history. So that part we are not considering.
right, sir, right, sir. And sir, finally, our center always believes about why not in India particular, the tribal literature. We cannot find any kind of tribal literature in archival model or even the today's modernity as concerned. That's the whole problem of their trajectory, to understand their past and their meaningful ways of living and the standardized living of their own style of methodology. How to
Yeah.
attract many of minds. The tribal literature is one of the most efficiency. Our two genius minds, one is Subham Das and another is Ruduna. Both are working on it, sir. And many of young scholars, those are associated with us, they are also working in their point of perspective. And I sure I am not challenging any kind of scholarship of the globe, but I am quite sure and pretty well thorough about our joint venture should be targeted many good works in future. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you very much. Thank you giving me the opportunity to at least to share in a platform from Odisha.
It's our pleasure, sir. And the CARD always stands for the community engagement and the larger interest of these neglected voices and the Adivasi epistemology as well. Now, I would like to invite Rudra to go for a formal vote of thanks as well to the honor of Professor Maguni Charan Behera. Over to Rudra. Shubham, please go for a vote of thanks, please.
Thank you so much, Dr. Jena. Thank you so much, Professor Behera, for your very fascinating talk over the tribal issues. You are also talking about several problems and educational issues over the tribal sector, and how we can pursue and address those issues to overcome these situations and go for a clear agenda on this matter. Thank you so much, Professor Behera, for your wonderful and fascinating talk.
Thank you. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity, Dr. Das.
Definitely. Thank you, sir. Now I would like to thank in particular the Director of Center for Adivasi Research and Development, Dr. Jena, for planning and gathering intellectuals like Dr. Behera to us. And we young researchers are very much interested and influenced by the several professors are joining us in this international talk show. We also thank our coordinating partners, Ravenshaw University, for the institutional support, IIM Sambalpur, and Central University of Odisha for their institutional support. I would like to thank all our patrons, Professor Sanjay Naik, Professor Sarath Palita, and Professor Mahadev Jaiswal for their relentless support to Center for Adivasi Research and Development. I would like to thank all our officials of Center for Adivasi Research and Development, advisors, and a very important person behind us, Professor Chandi Prasad Nanda, the convener of this webinar, and Professor Charudat Panigrahi, also the convener of this webinar, for their relentless support and guidance to make this event successful. Thank you so much for joining us, Professor Behera, and all our listeners from Facebook and YouTube Live, and those few people are joining us in Zoom to listening Dr. Behera. Thank you so much. The meeting is concluded.